How's it, guys? Making this video in a response to Reactionary Opinions' last video with the two bass brothers, Boniface Monkman, whatever, and then Russell Based. The two were sipping a whiskey and getting into the issues. And one of the things I appreciated was that they got into the dark issues as well, which a lot of people are shying away from. And me being like a naughty little kid, I like to go into those caves with my torch and find all the demons in the corners. So after all, we need to be demon slayers, and we should be looking into these dark corners, even though your liberal sister is standing behind there. Oh, don't go there, it's scary, They don't want to hear about this stuff. But yes, I want to touch on a couple of topics that they got into as well, as affirming a lot of their points of views. And we need to refine our views and wording, our counter arguments, our, get it into concise, refined terms. Basically steering away from the options that they have presented us with, of you either capitalist or you communist. We still don't even have someone with a great theory going forward into, or vision going forward into exactly how we should operate. I think there was an Austrian painter who came up with a pretty good idea that he wasn't very liked, and the entire world turned against him. And I really mean that. Backed by the bankster cabal elite, as we now discovered. But anyway, I digress. They made a good point with the political viewpoints of, the tiring, old, boring garbage of the ANC are corrupt and the ANC are useless and they incompetent. That is, firstly, it's totally wrong anyway. They're actually doing exactly what their masters want them to do. Just like communism was never there to create a utopia. It's actually there to destroy our society. So we have to get into this puppetry nature and keep ramming at it and punching that little soft spot of theirs. Why is Oppenheimer's and the big business and the corporates and Rupert backing this ANC and the cabal constantly? They are the enemies, and this is what we need to get into much more than saying just the ANC are corrupt and going into how disastrous their latest decrees are of lockdowns and so on. The idea of the Rockefellers, the Oppenheimers, the supposed above-board corporates, Anglo-Americans, they got these wonderful sounding names. They're neither Anglo nor American. There's a very specific culture and race behind it, mainly. We need to kind of refine our attacks and refocus the narratives on these things. Steer the conversations, always steer those conversations, be manipulative. But I have seen a much bigger group of people willing to start saying that, well, hang on, the Ruperts and the Oppenheimers, they are possibly not our friends. I've gone way past that. They're far past possibly not being our friends. When you look into it, even historically, with the Oppenheimers categorically saying how they supported the ANC way back when it was actually treason. And this stands to illustrate how powerful money is, because that could have been serious in that time if they were uncovered, which it was probably acknowledged but they were left because it was business, and they get the squeaky clean veneer because lots of money covers over a multitude of sins. You know, we've got this conspiracy theorist narrative, which, if you consider that in 1950s America, there was full-on trials about the communists in Hollywood, which is now called McCarthyism. This term alone, I mean, it's like, this is how brilliant how this cabal operates long-term, intergenerationally. They've got this narrative of McCarthyism. It's like it's immediately deducted 5 points from the debate, and you've lost now because you're McCarthyist, kind of implying that you unfairly accuse these people of basically destroying our society, subversive activities. In 1950s, that was the mainstream, and we have to be soberly aware of how far the narrative has moved, that people are saying now that's a conspiracy theorist, which was the establishment in 1950. Now you're a conspiracy theorist. That should tell you exactly who's in control as well. Of everybody. They don't control the hearts and minds of the vast majority. The other factor we need to look at is not just that we get on the same page and that we have the same vision. It's also the speed of the revolution, the counter-revolution. Quite honestly, it's glacial. And at this point, even if we are all waking up, the speed of this thing compared to the globalists, we're just never going to head them off. We're never going to actually win this thing based on the speed. And you look at how glacial it is, where the Jimmy Saviles can be born, live, and die as a full-blown pedophile and never be exposed, except after his death, when it's, who gives a shit? I mean, he's dead. He's not going to name names. There's no links anymore because he's dead, But now they talk about it. It's a little bit more mainstream, not massively so, because they're still a little bit wary of things getting out. But it just shows how the glacial movement is just not good enough. Delving into those dark areas, as the Bass Brothers while sipping whiskey, which is very ethnically European of them, discussing the important issues of the world currently, but they delved into the pedophilia and the very dark areas of the adrenochromes and things like that. And I think that this is all linked to exactly why we're under lockdown, by these absolute psychopaths. To me, it's completely linked, and this will get them going nuts on how I'm a conspiracy theorist. But when they touched on that Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein thing, when that's come out a little bit, that is a freaking hornet's nest, and they are just they're the nice guys of the lot. If you consider Pizzagate and go down the rabbit hole, and their strange links with Marina Abramovich. And this is like full on known. I mean, their strange artistic fetishes alone. In olden times, when old Boniface Axman was around, they would have been put to sword just for their strange artistic tastes, never mind the stuff they're actually doing, under their dungeons, in their dark dungeons of hell. John Podesta, to me, there's a recording of his voice and a child screaming in the background, and you hear that voice and you hear John Podesta's voice. I can pick up a person's voice when they call me immediately. I know exactly, I've got, perfect pitch as it is, and I identified that voice, not the only one. But, how far are people prepared to go? how much more must be exposed? What is their point at which they wake up? Is always the scary question. And I think that for many of them, it's never. It's like they hanging people in the streets. Children get nabbed in full view of them. There's no awakening point for a lot of these mask-wearing Marys that run around in the shops thinking that, and they use that excuse of, I'm protecting you. You know, it's quite, to me, it's more insipid than anything. You know, also the idea of this Christian nice guy. There's also the Christian good girl. The Christian good girl, you know, the Mary who's now wearing her mask in the shops and that, and who would always, you know, was only ever interested in marrying a rich man. And if you ever nailed them down to daring and dared to question them on why they think this is important, they immediately turn the tables and put themselves as the, you know, the good guy and the good girl in the situation. Women do this because they have to look after children, and they have to ensure that they're well fed and well looked after. And immediately they've inverted the entire thing and they've turned it into a virtue. You know, like the Christian good girls that I came across, it got to the point sometimes where it was ridiculous. You know, they in those churches they were saying, well, you must only marry within Christianity, but then they bring along their Jewish boyfriend to Christianity Explained, because it's much easier to do that than to actually just submit and then date a normal guy who may not be upwardly mobile. So they'll drag this guy along to Christianity Explained, you know, and we got to sit there and we had to sit there and tolerate this kind of stuff, while they just overlooked you. It wasn't even a question. It was like you didn't even exist. Is in a sense of procreation, and in the sense of going forth and multiplying. So, yeah, I also like to address this idea of the corporates, the monetary system, and politics. And in my view, it's feminine. It's not men thinking outside the box. It's not men farming, men building, men constructing. It's not masculine. It's not hunting. It's based on you don't need any of these skills to get into the monetary system to be wealthy. If anything, they almost need to be effeminate, a little bit compliant to the accepted behaviors within these corporate worlds. And now it's LGBT compliant, it's all kinds of other funny stuff. Feminism comes up a lot. You have to adhere to structures and ways of doing things within the company's ways of doing things. You have to be learned, you have to learn their systems. There's not much room for innovation. Same in research and development even, which should be geared perfectly towards the masculine mind. Figuring things out and being creative and using the out-the-box thinking. The research and development fields in the universities and that, they're all funded by the same cronies that will only back and fund certain types of projects and certain research, which points everybody towards, like, say, for example, vaccines and staying within the certain realms of what they want to promote, because they control those industries and they're also happy to control those industries and continue to put up these facades of being environmentalists and things like that. So everywhere it's just this feminized garbage society. And it's no wonder that a lot of men turn to sports and gaming and stuff like that, because although it's a lot of crap as well, at least there's still more of a level playing field than in the actual working world of money, where you've got no survival of the fittest whatsoever. It's not a foot race anymore. They've jumped on motorbikes, and you're expected to run this race on foot. So there's a very unreasonable attrition rate of the actual fittest. These billionaires with unlimited funding are essentially racing around on motorbikes and can capture every industry, every new invention. They don't invent it themselves. They put up these faces of Zuckerbergs and Bill Gateses and so on to create the facade that they were the brains behind the movements and things like that, when they just merely CIA controlled even, and were actually linked to billionaire corporates. Because money, as the boring old saying, money makes the world go round. And unfortunately, the Christians have complied to that mindset in the last more so in the last 30 years than at any time. This materialism that's come up in Christianity is vomit worthy. Not that I'm against having something nice or earning it in the correct way, but notice that the very things that the straight white Christian men invented are now the things which they can't obtain. I mean, they basically, with the control of money, have basically removed our inheritance in such terms as that those things were, those advances in technology and the fancy cars you see driving around, it's us. It originates from us. So there's a lot of issues that get misconstrued and not put in the right context and concisely. The whole capitalism versus communism thing. Like, why is there those two options? And you left arguing with this little hemmed off, fenced in argument points, instead of thinking, I don't want any of them. I want a new system. I want to make it myself. There's also, you guys discussed, Netflix a little bit, and this child pushing pedophilia stuff. What they're trying to do there is very clear. They're trying to normalize it as quickly as they can, because at the very least, we know that they're being caught playing and fiddling around with what they call underage girls. I mean, that Epstein thing and Les Wexner and all of the connection, Alan Dershowitz, the whole bloody lot. I mean, it's something else. And in their religion, I understand that you're a full-on adult at 13. So in some senses, like that is their belief. So there's none of this, well, that she's underage. It might be appalling and offensive to you, but now you got to think that this is like appalling and offensive to them, which is another reason why our cultures are not meant to be mixed. Actually, there's just certain things that are irreconcilable differences, and we should not be compromising or have to compromise if we don't deem it fit. But then on the other hand, I also think we mustn't be too prudish, and we've gone to kind of holier than thou, I don't know how to put it, where the boys must be separated from the girls in the church. And I mean, even in the old days when they would get married at 17 and the man was 18, that is taboo. That is absolutely, but it worked in that sense. And these kinds of things are where it's gone too far in the other direction. Getting married young and building a family, which is now they've pushed it out to, 21, 22, 23. Now it's like 30 for the woman to get married, 34 for the man. And that's already too late because of this business of you have a career. It's very difficult to set this time aside. To be spontaneous, people in their 30s already, you're not old, definitely you're still quite young at 30, but it's just on a sliding scale, the odds are a lot less because you're more set in your ways, you're not flexible, you're not going to do things spontaneously. The girl's going to check her diary and all sorts of funny stuff instead of ever reacting on a spontaneous sort of basis. The guy will have also only certain amounts of free time. Those have to line up. There's lots of reasons. The health of having babies is actually at its prime for white females at 25. By the way, they actually develop at different speeds, the different races, which is another thing that you probably not allowed to talk about. So the 3-year-old African-American kid's going to be bludgeoning the white kids around him of the same age. And it's going to be a totally unfair fight, and toddlers, I don't expect them to behave with restraint. But in saying that, it's not to say that they don't catch up in a lot of aspects. But there is that factor why we shouldn't be forced to integrate and things like that. You guys mentioned the killer punch. Well, I like to say the killer punch is exposing this cabal, this specific tribe of people. We need to be doing that more often. We cannot have this speech curtailment where we just not identifying the fucking problem. That is why we're being destroyed. Quite honestly, that is a huge, huge reason why we're being destroyed. This cabal have no qualms defending themselves intergenerationally. I mean, Jack the Ripper, to this day, the real culprit, has never been really mainstream exposed, where they've actually now recently discovered it was a Jew, Aaron Kaminsky, via DNA testing, by the way, of a shawl, which they still had. But there's a lot of strange behaviors that go on where they will write an article about how this is actually nonsense. So even 100 years later, they still feel the need to defend this guy, to keep this facade of not exposing fucking Count Dracula in the community. Even Leo Frank, who was convicted and was guilty as could possibly be of the murder of Mary Fagan, still to this day, they're jumping around making plays and stories about how he was unfairly lynched, when what actually happened was the men found out he was going to be the death penalty commuted, and then probably, who knows, with all their wrangling and political connections and power, in 10 years' time would have probably been free when everybody's kind of forgotten about it. But no, they thought, we're not having this. They got hold of him and hanged him. A whole bunch of them. And that's what based really is. It's when you see something that they're going to get away with and you go, oh, hell no. And still to this day, they still, trying to maintain that this was, completely unfair and demonizing those people who did that. You have to think about this. So what sort of people defend themselves retrospectively hundreds of years down the line? And what sort of people are we that refuse to defend very defensible things where we're being demonized and maligned. Our generation, by the way, the boomers are in that unique situation where they can just watch it from almost the observer's point of view. They've got their comfy space and they know it's not going to affect them in their time, which is really frustrating because a lot of the things we are facing right now is the boomer generation, giving up our inheritance for us. And still to this day, they kind of don't want to acknowledge a lot of things. The yes referendum in 1992, I think it was, or, about voting for the negotiations with fucking terrorists and murderers. And worse than the power sharing and elections, and even going to the point of where they worshipping this fucking Mandela character. This is like a caricature, and honestly was a puppet all along. You look at his law career. I mean, all this stuff. How did he become a lawyer? It's such an oppressive, horrible society. He was a lawyer in a Jewish firm, by the way. And you see who influences and wields influence on these people. Joe Slovos and Helen Suzmans and the heroes of those days. It's so obvious what's going on. We need to get that out there. And then no matter if you're losing supporters or being offensive or whatever. In terms of red pills, I might think there's only one. There's about 300 bloody red pills. Eventually you start getting a little bit, like the kid taking medicine, cough mixture, the old days when it was really vile. And a couple of black pills too. Those are actually the best ones because they make you absolutely revolt against the entire system. In terms of white pills, I would like somebody to present a few because I ain't seen nothing to celebrate yet. Nothing truly strategic, nothing where we actually took power. I mean, the Brexit vote and the Trump thing was what I thought was the strategic, but it wasn't strategic. That was political. And they just decided to just deny us those very things. I mean, Brexit is just, it'll never happen. In fact, they got more refugees. It's quite phenomenal. It's almost like they troll the ethnic populations of Europe and America and South Africa. It's a complete troll operation as well as wielding absolute power. So, yeah, that's the killer punch, which we often omit to talk about. We need to weaponize our language and our concise summaries of things, and that's an art form as well. The left did very well in that, in quick terms and bigots, homophobes, Islamophobes, and then backed it up with short philosophies and ideologies. We need the same thing for our side as well. This lockdown is able to be done because people's minds are locked down. They're locked down and tied down by fear of losing favor or holding unpopular opinions, so on and so forth. With regards to, going back to the political things, the DA, quite honestly, is worse than the ANC. I mean, not worse than now ANC, Ramaphosa, maybe worse than the Zuma ANC, because to be worse than Ramaphosa ANC is fucking impossible. But, this DA is something else. They are like close family members, absolutely passionately support the DA. I have huge arguments about this all the time. It's real, this blindness, and they're almost worse because they got this another green pass, another Dracula that's not been identified, and that's subverting your entire peoples under the facade of being their true heroes in opposition. Yeah, I mean, when you see how they operate and how they get the richest among us, they've actually got not the new cadre billionaire wealth, but they've got other billionaire wealth of old wealth, which would have been the wealth that would have been passed on to our generation. But it's now being cut off from our generation, and they're quite happy to go along with this. They're living in their space in Constantia and Fresnay and so on, and go to their champagne parties with the DA. Well-spoken people, but the tick boxes of the ideologies, it's ANC, 101. Yeah, I mean, I was watching a documentary on maths, and is it discovered or is it invented? And it's quite obvious maths is not invented, it's discovered. A right angle triangle is always a right angle triangle. The three sides of a triangle all add up to 180 degrees. 2 plus 2 gives you 4 of whatever you've added the two together. There's just fundamental points of views. It's we discovering it as we go along. And likewise, I think everything is mathematical and precise, not a construct. Your justice of right down to what's right and what's wrong. The gays always love to say, oh, but they're not harming anybody. And, if you break it down and you get into the nitty gritty of it, it is destroying society. Homosexuality and degeneracy of all kinds, pornography users. We've all contributed to it in some way by the name of sin, which we are all guilty of, which is part of being Christian, is you have to acknowledge that you are a sinner. I mean, far be it from the people who are actually ruling, who are full-blown evil. They happily go along with evil, as we all know anyway. But I believe in that there's a concise right and wrong. There's no gray scale. And that's a big difference in the outlook of me versus the outlook of most university students and graduates. Yeah, I mean, we need to learn to start enjoying a few black balls as well, and seeing things with a fresh pair of eyes. I mean, I look now at the 1960s in America with the civil rights thing and the civil rights movements and those things, and students forced under armed guard to integrate. This is a major, major human rights abuse. I choose to integrate. I choose that. But when you got a gun and you forcing people, so America was overthrown a long time ago in many respects. They've just demonized continually since the 1960s, the middle America, which I bought into in a big way with watching films like Mississippi Burning, brilliantly portrayed, but possibly 90% lies and slander. Where you look at that now with a fresh pair of eyes and you see total tyranny, and maybe those were the good guys, the guys that bumped off that communist bunch of people that came in there. So yeah, that's the nature of these things, and the youth is used as a weapon. which is another topic that we should get into as well, and how they use them, why they use that, and why they're almost disinterested in you once you're over the age of 40. You're not even portrayed in a sense. But anyway, it was a good to see you guys again, and see you guys posting kind of just in the spontaneous moments of it, and discussing the things that are, looking into those dark corners and so on. I hope we can, break through to more people. And we need to look at that as well, like in terms of crossing over, because we all talk to one another, and it's staying, we kind of self-contain, we quarantine ourselves. Well, not even just ourselves. We need to unquarantine. We need to go out there and break into the other realms. Even when you see people walking in the streets, perhaps wearing a mask, like speak to them. Say, well, why would you affirm government lies? Anyway, let's stay strong and enjoy your whiskeys, and I'll catch you all later.